speaker here. We're talking about Christopher Denver, who is coming from Chicago today to share his wisdom and expertise with RPA. RPA as a service. So, Chris, thank you for being here with us. Christopher Denver is a longtime process transformation expert who has realized that automation is an excellent tool to assist in transforming processes. For the past 5 years, Chris has been assisting his clients with process and digital transformation, primarily following an RPA as a service model that he will share with us today. He co-leads the global RPA as a service proactive from Crow LLP, which is an international audit, tax, and consulting firm. He is a CPA and holds an accounting degree from the Great University of Notre Dame and an MBA from the University of Chicago. Chris, what a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and expertise with our global audience today.
Hi, Jose. Thank you so much for your warm welcome in a cold city of Chicago today. And I welcome everyone to this presentation. People are still creeping in, which is wonderful. I hope you enjoyed the Nintex presentation earlier. I think those are great guys. And I really enjoyed Eric's discussion and the cool light bulb he had behind his head, which I think that's a really, really awesome video trick. So I'll try to steal that, which I think is the most sincere form of flattery. But today I wanted to talk to you about keeping it simple, right? So how do we implement RPA in a way that makes sense for even very small organizations? And by way of introduction to this topic, as you know, Crow, of course, like most of the major consulting firms, has the sort of the large at-scale RPA implementation practice. And that's a wonderful practice, right? And I know Nintex and other folks are out there and they're doing great work in that space, and so are we. But a lot of our clients would look at us and say, look, you know, I don't feel this, right? Like, I don't think we can go super scale out of the gate. And so I kind of wanted to talk about why that is, why they have those questions or concerns or risks, and how we've addressed that using RPA as a service. So oops, let me try to move forward here. And I appreciate your bearing through our technical difficulties this morning. So today I want to talk about sort of the principal risks of implementing RPA, and then sort of why is RPA as a service a good, foil against those risks, right? How do we de-risk or de-cost an RPA implementation using RPA as a service? Then finally, to talk about how the security is protected under an RPA as a service model. Because the first question I had to me when I started dipping into RPA came from an internal auditor, and she said, "This is great, but what if somebody hacks my bots?" Right? And so we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk also about sort of the future state of a fully automated enterprise. So I'm going to go through this super quick. I assume everybody who's on this call kind of knows what RPA is. And sort of the way we look at it is you've got a technology infrastructure that supports business applications and that can support an RPA presence. And the whole idea with having RPA as a service, or RPA, excuse me, is now embedding more and more specific tools around our machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI and ML. And I'll go through this very quickly too. So this is where organizations generally struggle and find opportunities to introduce RPA, right? So if there's time-consuming manual entries, there's disconnected legacy systems, you've got pain points around processes, there's risks, there's errors, it's not scalable, it's not resilient, it's highly people-dependent, and people can be very dear these days, as we all know, with the labor market being what it is. So this identifies a lot of these risks, right? So what are the risks of automation? It costs too much, right? It takes too long. What if we do this and incur all this cost, time, energy, and effort and investment, and no one uses it? What if it doesn't work in our systems? There's no way, this is a great one, there's no way I can ask my CIO to take on one more project, right? That person will kill me at this point, right? Listen, I don't understand how all this really works because I'm a business leader, but I'm not a technologist. So how can I manage the project? After it's installed, what happens, right? Who will manage it? What is our governance structure going to look like tomorrow, next week, 10 years from now? What if our systems change in a year, rendering the bots useless? Okay, well, that's part of the planning process. We'll talk about this a little bit. I talked about this. What if somebody hacks our bots? And then what if we just don't make it, right? If we do everything right and it just doesn't execute well, and we're left with a big price tag. So let's break those down. Oh, I'm sorry, I was gonna say each of these comes from a pretty legitimate place. So these are not, whiner baby attitudes. These are legitimate attitudes and impressions that people have, just based on what people see or hear in the RPA space, sort of around the world, right? So if you spend any time on this stuff, you've seen implementation failures. You've seen projects that run. What do they say? Two times the timeline and 3 times the expense is what you should plan for a major system implementation. They cost too much, they run over budget, they take too long. The systems don't actually work when we go live, right? So I know all of you have probably been, like myself, part of projects or IT implementations where we get to a point where, like, look, budget's gone, time is long run out, let's just take whatever we've got, however bad it is, and flip the switch, right? And turn this thing on, and it's okay, but it's not great, right? So it's not doing what we spent the $200 million, $300 million, thinking about SAP and Oracle implementations, right? But the kind of dollars you throw around those, and it doesn't actually do everything that you signed off on that it would do. And your IT team is like, they're not sitting around idle. They're not calling you, hey, do you have any projects for me to do, right? So that's a legitimate concern as well. They have very limited bandwidth. And everyone has systems that don't interact with each other, systems that don't talk to each other. And then, of course, security is an ongoing concern today, and it should always be, right? So we always need to bake that into every recipe that we think about around IT issues. So how does RPA as a service solve for these particular risks? So on the cost side, so the downside of it, right, is traditional RPA licensing models can cost $100,000, $250,000, $300,000, mainly because the RPA providers, and I'm looking at the Blue Prism, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, they want you to buy the full suite of products, right? So they want you to go all in. Of course they do. But it requires sort of a dedicated server. Your IT department has to have the time and to load it, manage it, scale it, protect it, configure it, the whole thing. And as we discussed, they don't have the time to do this. Now, all that said, Microsoft's Power Automate tool is much cheaper upfront, and it's driving some significant price changes in the marketplace, although Power Automate itself, no offense to the Power Automate fans, is lacking some functionality. They're a little bit behind the big three, if you would, Blue Prism, UiPath, and Automation Anywhere. But Microsoft is Microsoft, right? They're figuring this out, so they'll do it, I assume, within a number of years, they'll have a comparable product to the big three at a probably much lower price point. So you're already starting to see some of the bigger dogs kind of responding to that pricing. But so what's the solution to this? Well, RPA as a service is a great solution to this. So under this model, you rent the license from me or from another provider, right? It reduces your upfront costs. So you're not investing the couple $100K to get the license, put it on a box, configure it, and do all this sort of thing. It's all done for you. It's already been done, right? It's already baked in cost on our side. This allows you to kind of try before you buy, test drive the car, date before you get married, however you prefer to express this. But this way, you can see, like, look, is RPA as a service, or is RPA period going to work in our company? Will our people adopt to it? And if it doesn't work out, you just cancel the contract, right? So you're out the cost of the build to this point, but you don't have a multi-year licensing deal that you signed with, Blue Prism or whoever it is, that you've got, okay, now no one accepts this, and we've got these bots that are sitting here idle, and it's a big disaster. That goes away, right? And this reduces the cost, especially when you go to your CFO or your CIO, this kind of reduces that cost of failure, right? So if this thing doesn't work in any way, the risks are tremendously reduced in terms of incurring these costs that end up going nowhere. And in the bottom right, I drew this little graphic. I was just kind of finding the fine points on my my presentation last night. So you can go from bars of gold and silver down to $100 and $250. Now these prices are not exact, so please do not accept those as a quote for any type of a project. And it takes a long time to implement, right? So all of us have experienced some sort of an ERP implementation or integration at some point, version upgrade, whatever it is. And these can run for months and years, and things can cause just tremendous pain. Your staff gets overworked wherever you are in the organization. The IT department gets crushed. You have to hire in these outside consultants who are super expensive. RPA as a service is a great solution to that concern, right? So our typical RPA as a service project will run anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, and frankly, they often run much, much faster than that. When we start out, we prefer to do the first spot as something that's really, really simple, a pretty easy layup, right? Just get it in, get started on this, get your folks, your people, your culture adopting to it. All right, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, is the cultural revolution around this stuff. But once you get the easy one in, get it done, build up the IT infrastructure around it that was required to support the bot's life, then it's easier to go and do a second one that's a little bit more complex, a third one that's much more complex, and a fourth one that's super complex, whatever it is, right? But the point here is getting in small, easy, fast, achieve wins, have those wins recognized by the organization and start to scale. So, again, we've done it very simply, so we expect a minimal impact on the organization during this period. So people are like, okay, that didn't really hurt, right? And here's this, we've already got an automation up and running. So what if no one uses it, right? And so I've thrown an example of some terrible person named Chris, who might or might not be myself, who some years ago downloaded the Weight Watchers app to lose weight during COVID, and started off, this person, who may or may not be me, used it every single day. But then after about 6 months, this terrible person stopped using it, but still pays the monthly fee even now. And so this terrible person named Chris is now paying for something he doesn't even use, okay? So you hate to be in that situation where you've purchased robotics, implement it in your organization, and people just ignore it, right? One of the things I love to say is that, in the movies, the bots always kill the humans. But in real life, humans kill bots dozens of times every day. And I tell people that I guarantee you've killed a bot or 2 or 3 even this week or even this morning. And they look at me funny, and I said, well, have you ever logged on to like United Airlines and you get the phone tree and it's like, hi, I recognize your phone number. And then you're like, no, just take me to the agent. Just take me to the agent. Right? Well, you're killing that bot. You're defeating what that bot's purpose is to route your call, and you're skipping it, right? So things like that, pop-ups on websites, things like that, those are all bots. And so killing those, Xing them out, that's killing it, right? So what if we do all this work, spend all this money, and no one uses our stuff? Well, proper change management is the right solution. And this is not an RPA as a service idea. This is universal to everything that you do, right? So it can be an in-house or an external effort. But you have to use experienced people, right? And this is going to include experienced people. I mean, by people who've done this before, right? You don't want to miss on the first couple of bots. After that, it'll sort of self-sustain once your culture reflexes to it, adopts it. People recognize that this is not a job killer. It's really pain relief, as I mentioned down below, right? So overcoming that cultural resistance. Everybody's read those LinkedIn articles about how the bots are going to replace you, and you're going to be destitute, and some bot's going to have your job. So overcoming that cultural resistance is a key thing, particularly in the early days of a project. It's terrible if you implement, and I've heard some stories where companies have spent $5-6 million to implement 38 bots at one time, and then 7 months later, 2 of those bots are still running. And the reason is because people kill them, right? People just refuse to interact with them. And if the bot's sitting there and it's doing its thing and nobody's picking up its outputs or giving it inputs, it's a waste of time and money. So there should be a lot of communication. You should have celebrations of successes, early days, broadcast them broadly, market throughout your organization. Hey, look, we've got this bot and it's really kicking butt, over here, and it's saving Steve all this time, and it's a wonderful thing, right? And then have Steve get up there and say, yeah, this is awesome. Didn't kill my job. I'm actually elevated to a higher and better use, right? All the menial tasks are off my plate, and now I can really use my full wattage of my brain to help the organization. But user training and ongoing support are critical, right? So we did have, and I'll tell you a horror story here. We had an implementation of a bot that would download invoices from a client. They had an Oracle Cloud instance, okay? And so the bot was built, tested, moved into production, and the first person who decided to run this bot submitted a download request of over 2,500 invoices. Well, the bot starts running, and it ran for 2.5 days, right? So even though it's moving much faster than a person could do, when you load 2,500, pull down 2,500 PDFs and stick them in a shared directory type of a message to the bot, it's just going to spin for a while, right? And so other people were submitting requests to the bot, and nothing was happening with their requests. And so they were like, well, it's not working, right? So having user training so they know, hey, look, if you're gonna load in a 2,500 item request, put it towards a part of the month when nobody's using this. This is a good point. And also, how do you support this? So having, and shame on me for making this failure, but we should have had an outgoing communication to those people who were subsequently submitting requests and say, hey, look, you need to wait for a few minutes because this other request has been submitted. We hear you, but it's just not quite there. So missing any of these steps can really be challenging to your successful implementation. It could even turn it into a complete failure. So how compatible are these systems, right? And we've seen it before. We implement a new system, it refuses to work with one or more legacy systems, and it creates chaos. And RPA as a service, or RPA in general even, all these RPAs are generally compatible with nearly any system via an API connection. So we've built bots that are compatible with AS400s and sort of mainframe type systems, as long as those mainframes are connected somehow, right? So we did have a client who had an AS400 box that sat by itself in its own little room. It wasn't connected to the internet or the company's network or anything. And then they became angry with us when it couldn't connect. We couldn't build a bot to connect to it. And I said, well, come on, guys, it's literally completely isolated, right? So they didn't become angry, but they understood the problem. So RPA can be a great tool to sort of bridge gaps between systems without doing massive API integrations and hiring really expensive people to build those integrations for you, or junking your systems and upgrading to something that's newer and flashier. RPA can really kind of help sustain, I hate to say this, but can sustain some of your legacy systems longer, keep them operating functionally for a longer period of time, so you can defer perhaps those system implementation costs. How do you collaborate with IT? Well, okay, this might be difficult, and I'm sorry for all the IT people on the call. I'm an accountant, I'm not an IT person, right? But collaborating with IT is critical in all this stuff, and I don't mean to say that they're unreasonable bucks who want to tangle their horns together. I'm more saying it can be challenging because they have their own set of things that they're super concerned about, right? So their calendars are almost always fully booked. It's almost exclusively mission critical stuff, right? Oh, we got to prevent this hack. We've got a Trojan. We've got whatever it is, DDoS attacks and all that sort of thing. So saying, hey guys, we want you to slap one more thing on your daily calendar and it can cause some problems and challenges, right? Particularly if IT feels that you're going around them or going behind their back to implement RPA using the RPA as a service model, where they're not as heavily invested in the day-to-day building of it, right? So the solution with the RPAS model, it requires the least effort from IT. However, we always include IT at every step that they wish to be involved in, right? So we follow whatever your system development lifecycle protocols are. We follow all your change management protocols that the IT department has developed. We prefer to have them sort of sit in a governance role, which is a better use of their time, I think, than having them sit down and get their hands dirty with all the coding. We'll do that, right? But have them sort of sit and make sure that whatever we're doing is compatible with their overall protocols, with all their other systems and so forth, right? As I mentioned, RPA is very compatible, but you need to make sure that they feel like at the end of the day, if they're hit by an auditor or by their management team and they say, hey, look, show me how you guys perfected governance over this tool, they've got to be able to answer that, right? And we've got to be able to help them answer that question, because hanging people out is not what this is about. This is about, building automation and scaling it throughout an organization and having really great client experiences. So, let's see. Let's see, anything else on this slide? Yeah, so we only involve them really if there's critical tasks that require their input, their oversight, right? Provisioning us access to servers and systems and things like that. The clients that I have an IT rep or 2 or 3 on every single status call. Sometimes they attend, sometimes they don't, but we keep them fully informed at every step as to where we're at, what's happening, what systems we're using, how we're using them, and so forth, so that they can answer those governance questions when they're tasked for it. So then project management becomes critical. So like, okay, I've heard a lot about automation, but our IT department is swamped, our PMO office is booked through 2025. Even if we decide to do this, there's no way we have the resources. Okay, so outside provider assistance under an RPAS model is an awesome solution for this, right? And I love this graphic. I searched around and I found this, kind of different balancing thing, right? So the way we try to run our at Crow, we run this RPA as a service model is we integrate and balance with all the pre-existing departments and governance models within our client organization. So we're very sensitive to keeping them in line, making sure that they can move their processes through smoothly, they can check all the boxes, they can maintain their governance or whatever, their managerial skills, whatever they need to be able to do to prove to their bosses that they're doing their jobs. We're going to comply with that and make sure that they shine in the eyes of their higher ups, right? So we oftentimes take over the PMO. Sometimes we split it. I have a client that we're splitting it with an existing PMO office that they have that has, one person 4 or 5 hours a week that they can give to this project. So we've integrated them into our PMO team, and we have email exchanges and everything before our weekly status updates. We make sure that we get everything pulled together. So making sure that we just overall achieve a happy and successful project is a key part of this. And the outsourced PMO model should integrate seamlessly, right? And if you're using a provider and it's not, I would challenge your provider and say, hey, look, we're not working, we're pulling oars in different directions, right? How do we fix this problem? Because it is a problem, and it'll eventually lead to some sort of an issue down the road with the implementation. So governance, right? After we go live, what happens to the bot? Hey, I'm the client, I'm this potentially small company. I don't have this exhaustive IT team with all the skills. So we don't have the knowledge and we don't have the resources to manage and monitor automations, right? And I've got a client that specifically has said this to me. It's like, look, I need you guys to stick around. So the solution there is to migrate from an RPA as a service model, which, where we're kind of, the client sort of outsources to us all the building, the scoping, the build, the design, the build, the test, and then the move to live implementation. And at that point, the COE as a service model, Center of Excellence as a service, could take over and maintain those bots for the client into the future. So it ensures coverage of the help desk, right? So when things go screwy or something like that, and frankly, all the bots that we build, if the bot fails overall or fails on processing a particular item, it kicks out an error message, sends it via an email, starts a help ServiceNow ticket, right, for us, and that way, it pops into my inbox or my developer's inbox or wherever it is, and that way we know almost before the client does, or probably even before the client is aware, that there's been an issue with the bot, and we start working and processing a solution so we can meet our SLAs. All the software maintenance, configuration, upgrades, all this sort of thing that has to come along the line. Now, I principally use UiPath myself. I have no problems at all. We do have a client where we're building Power Automate. We have a client where several clients who are building Blue Prism, and many clients who are doing Automation Anywhere. And so I don't have any problems with any of the major four, and even some of the second tier, if you want to count Power Automate as a major four. I don't know that I do. Anyway, it's a different discussion. But none of these I don't really have any problems with any of the major systems that are out there from an RPA standpoint. But maintaining that software, doing all the configuration, doing all the upgrades, because UiPath pushes patches a lot, and we got to make sure that when the patch gets pushed, it doesn't disable a bot that we've got functioning for a client under this RPA as a service model. So the COE is responsible for that. They're responsible for seeing, UiPath announces their patches and making sure that this is going to be fine. And then reporting is key, and it's all, I've only got one word on this, and I probably should have put in an entire slide. When you have a bot up and running under COE or under RPA as a service or any other model, if it runs effectively, it's like nothing's happening in the background, right? So it's very justifiable for the leadership of the company to say, hey, look, we spent this money, we incurred this time and energy, got these bots in place, and I don't see anything. So one of the things that we do, and I recommend this as a best practice, is to implement some sort of a dashboarding program using Power BI or Tableau or whatever you've got that's already available to you, and do reporting on your bot, right? Have your bot fill up operating statistics. How many times did it run? How many items did it process each time it ran? How long was each run time? Basic core statistics like that that demonstrate that the bot is running and that it's producing. It's actually being productive. And capturing also how many errors, right? So how many errors is the bot encountering? And if that number starts ticking up, maybe you need to do a rebuild of the bot. Maybe you need to reconsider a second bot to handle this different new process that's coming through that continues to fail the first bot. So reporting is critical to our operations and our long-term success with our clients. And finally, scaling automations in the future. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the future state, but everything that I'm talking about with this RPA as a service model is done with the idea like we're going to do one bot today. Tomorrow we're going to do another one. You're going to love that. You're going to ask for a third one. We're going to do that. You're going to ask for a fourth one. We're going to do that. And then sooner or later, we're sort of off to the races and we're automating an enterprise towards that vision of a fully automated enterprise for the future. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that's critical about our COE as a service model is that it integrates with an existing COE at our clients as well. So if they already have a COE that handles their PeopleSoft implementation or whatever it is, and we can integrate with their skills and resources and their team as well, and make sure that we're collaborating together for a successful outcome for everyone. So let's talk just a moment about security, right? So what if somebody hacks my bots? As much good as automation can do quickly, could a hack cause it to do even something that's really, really bad even faster, right? And of course the answer is, well, yeah, right? So if you have carelessly put your banking information into your bot and have it go out and pull down bank reports from you, and you got your account, you got your logins, you got all that sort of resident in the bot, and somebody hacks the bot, you've got a problem, right? So now your information is out. So under our RPA as a service model, we ensure that it's highly, highly secure. And I'm sure even our under a non-as-a-service model, it should be highly secure as well. So isolating your environments, this way you can follow good internal controls, right? So you have a dev environment, a test, a production, restricting access to each one of those sort of as an IT general control. If any of you are SOX clients or SOX companies, this is a critical thing that you need to be able to perfect and demonstrate, obviously. RPA as a service includes code reviews at each stage. So as we move from, sort of really design to dev and dev to test and test to prod, we generally have an IT auditor or, CISO or somebody from their team sitting in there monitoring the code migration, validating that there's been nothing added or taken away that isn't well known and circulated and approved by the leadership team. Following IT audit, system development lifecycle control protocols and controls. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Enabling audit trails in all the relevant systems is critical. Everything should be very transparent, right? Nothing should be happening behind the curtains. And there's, just in the security itself, this is UiPath specific, but there's AES 265-bit encryption. Sorry, I think it's 256. I think I flip-flopped this. Bit encryption. The passwords are all protected in CyberArk. So we've, the major bot providers they're all taking this very seriously, and they're ensuring that they've got top-notch tools, right? And as a final thing, we also set up multi-tenancy with all of our bots. So if by chance someone were to hack one of the bots, they couldn't hack another bot either from your organization or from another organization, right? We've secured this. Now, a motivated hacker with bajillions of dollars to spend will find a way, as we all know, but this is all about reducing risk to a reasonable level. And when we believe we've got our clients there, most of our CISOs, our client CISOs, are very happy with this, including Pro's CISO, which is pretty amazing if you know him. So what does this future state look like in a fully automated enterprise? So I've got a little rainbow graphic here, right? And part of the idea around that is that no matter how much you chase it, it's always a little further off. So you're never there, right? There is no destination of a fully automated enterprise because things are changing constantly, as we know, in the IT landscape. And so there's always more new features and functions that come out all the time. But, as I mentioned earlier, under the RPA as a service model, we build one bot, then another, and then more, and we try to scale this, right? And eventually, if you've got enough bots in your operation, a client will approach us. Now, we haven't been running long enough for this to happen yet, but you'll come to us, or we'll come to you and say, hey, look, we're paying a lot of money every month as part of this maintenance fee that includes Crow's payment of the license. Would it make more sense for the client to buy their own licenses? We say, sure, and we'll help facilitate that transaction, and you can use our discount, right? So it's a great solution to eventually, if you want to be a fully automated enterprise, if you want to own your own licenses, this is how use RPA as a service to test drive it. And if you love it, then you buy the car at some point down the road, right? And handle your own financing, etc. Under the COE as a service model, we provide assistance to our clients' COEs, so we kind of stand them up until they're ready to run on their own, right? So we give them all the skills, the bandwidth, and things that they need to run their own COE around RPA. And then as they build skills around this, as they build their own competencies, and they feel confident to do it, we convert it over to them, right? So it's now yours. Bot governance ongoing is yours. Thank you very much. And with a fully active COE, whether it's as a service or it's internal to the company, it should manage all the sourcing, the prioritization of new automation opportunities, which should lead to even more accelerated growth of bots in your company. And one thing to always keep in mind, and this is a good rule of thumb, regardless of systems, is when do these things get sunsetted? When do we decommission? Right? No bot is going to last forever. So let's begin with that end in mind, to borrow from Stephen Covey, and say, hey, look, what does the sunsetting look like? What's our estimates of this? How long will this run? What will we do when it dies or we have to pull it plug on the bot? So making sure that you've got some plans in place so that there are no surprises at any point during the life cycle of these bots. And in fully automated status, right, you've got bots running in all or nearly all your departments, performing a whole variety of tasks, really, really energizing your company and allowing your people to move it to higher and better use. So some of my final thoughts, what is RPA as a service, right? It's simple, it's flexible, it's easy to get in started now, very quick results. It's pretty low cost compared to the full load model. And like I said, you can see very, very fast results and get the benefits right away. I want to thank everybody for your time today. I really appreciate your attention. And of course, my favorite line is, if you hate it, automate it.
That's fantastic, Chris. There we go. If you hate it, automate it. Christopher, we have a number of questions that have come up here as you're speaking. Several questions around the concept of the Center of Excellence. So let me bring my camera back on, and let me start with that.
There you go.
The Center of Excellence as a service. William Fuller makes a comment here that it's not easy to get departments and functions to believe in or accept the advice of an internal Center of Excellence.
Yeah.
How does a third-party external group get credibility in the Center of Excellence? Just curious about some of your best practices that I think people are going to be listening to actively, because they may want to be incorporated that internally, because Centers of Excellence often struggle to get their ideas implemented internally.
Boy, what a great call out, right? So that's a proof in the pudding question, which I love. So thank you, William, for that question. A couple things I would say about that is that we have a lot of experience operating under the COE as a service model that I feel allows us to it's built our muscles in the space of doing this internal convincing, right? So part of our overall change management philosophy around RPA and RPA as a service is that we want to come in and we want to market these successes, these early successes, broadly across the organization. And those are generally occurring before we've established any sort of formal COE, whether it's formal COE or formal COE as a service. So we want to bring those wins through a lot of internal marketing and branding, right? So I've got a great client who, we had some bots that we did, I think they went live in August and September for them. And then, by January, February, the CFO came to me and said, hey, look, we got to rebrand these and recirculate them, because he had sort of hitched his star to this whole RPA as a service idea. And so he wanted to make sure that his bona fides, right, were buffed. And so, sure. So we sat down with their marketing team and we kind of came up with an internal marketing scheme to kind of blast, targeted emails around, some stuff on their company SharePoint that talked about the great successes of this. So there's many, many ways to unfortunately skin this cat, and I'm going to give you the consultant's answer. It depends, William. But working with your organization, understanding their culture, these are some things that we do very, very well. So we try, we do our best. Are we always successful? Well, no, right? So I'll be very, very transparent. Doesn't always work, but it works a lot of the time, right? And we're able to kind of leverage what we understand about culture and cultural resistance to try to achieve broader acceptance of these things, right? From my perspective, I generally find that people tend to pull harder on the oars when they've had a chance to chart the course of the ship, right? So we want to take, if there's some areas of intransiency, any areas that are pushing back within your company, we want to go after those people head on and bring them into the planning process and say, look, how can we make this work for you, and try to pull them in. So totally understand what you're saying. It depends on really what your culture and the personalities of the people involved are, and it does not always work. I'll agree with you.
Well said. The famous quote on if you want to get people engaged in implementation, you must engage them at the point of creation. And that well said there. That's a complex question and answer. As a matter of fact, we're going to have my last session today is going to focus exclusively on this cultural aspect of automation, because it's such an important concept, and but it's a very challenging concept. With a bit more tactical, another question is related to a comment you made that the bots, they get rejected by the end users, after some time. And the question is more about user acceptance testing. And the person who provided this question is saying, maybe I'm old school, but we used to do user acceptance testing. Is that not a thing in the land of RPA nowadays? Or is it unique to traditional implementations? Or is also a feature in a no low-code environment as well? The question is about just a little bit of context on you saying that the users may have rejected. Is user acceptance testing still a thing on RPA implementation or not?
Absolutely. So what a great question, and another hole in my presentation. So I appreciate you calling it out. No, so user acceptance testing is absolutely part of our overall process. What we find, though, is that when you're implementing RPA, you're changing the underlying process, right? It's a digital transformation of a formerly manual process. So if you think about it, there's a progression of manual tasks to where a bot starts, and then a bot ends, and then it hands it back to people, right? So there's these two transition points or more where you've got people and bots interacting, and making sure you manage those transition points that's the secret sauce, right? Like that's what makes this work or fail, frankly. So yes, user acceptance testing helps, but you've asked somebody in many cases, right? So I'm just going to pick on random people who don't exist. Okay. So Sally has been doing this same task for 25 years in your company, and her whole value and sense of self-worth is tied up in manually producing this report. And all of a sudden you automated that report. Well, what's Sally going to do, right? So unless you've got a good change management program that's like, hey, Sally, look, we're going to train you up because you got all this institutional knowledge. We don't want to lose you, right? So we're taking away the majority of what you do. And I've got some great war stories that I probably don't have time to share about this, right? Where we're able to kind of scale people up and get them to perform a higher and better use than this manual reporting stuff. But if you don't do that, right? If you don't take that time to work with Sally, what is she going to do? She's like, okay, well, I can lose my job or I can kill this bot, right? I'll kill this bot. And so that's what I'm really talking about specifically there is culture, and people kill bots, as I mentioned, every single day, dozens of times a day. It's the easiest thing in the world to do is to kill these things. So working on that change management protocol, yes. Doing user acceptance testing, absolutely, right? We follow all the best practices, system development lifecycle changes and all that sort of thing. Absolutely. Definitely UAT is part of it, and making sure, though, that we're managing this process well and we're interfacing with all the people who are impacted by these bots is critical.
And we're almost out of time here, Christopher. So I want to hit a point that you made very well. First of all, you talk about some very unique things, very important things like governance and that we had not discussed in the previous session. But specifically in our previous session, there was a lot of questions about, hey, listen, I'm not a Fortune 500 company. I am a smaller business who maybe think I can use RPA, but maybe it's too expensive. And I think you talked about this, but I want to emphasize RPA as a service, the way you're discussing here, it's a great way for maybe smaller businesses or people who want to experiment with RPA to get started. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. Thank you, Jose. So absolutely, this is a great way to kind of get started, dip your toe in the water for fairly low cost, right? So I would say our average RPA as a service bot is in the $20,000 range, but we try to do the first one out of the gate, like I said, keep it simple, right? Keep it very, very high level bot. It's usually down around 10 to 12,000, right? And exact quotes, I can't give you that, right? It'll vary by the instance and how complex the bot is and how tough your systems are to work with, right? IFT infrastructure is a bot killer. So that's another thing we have to worry about and work with our clients on a lot, is to get their IT infrastructure tuned up to support a bot. But yes, this is a very easy, fast, low cost way, low risk way to get yourself automated a little bit. Test it out, test drive it, see if it works, date a while. If you love it, marry it. If you don't, no harm, no foul, right? We break up, we swipe left or whatever it is that the kids do these days, and everything's good. And you've tried it, right? And you know that it doesn't work in your company for whatever reason, but at least give it a try.
Terrific. What a great presentation. Thank you for introducing RPA as a service. Incredibly helpful perspectives. Appreciate your thought leadership. And on behalf of our global community, again, thanks for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful presentation. I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Christopher Denver with Crow, and a wonderful presentation and introduction to all of us on RPA now as a service. We are going to be shifting gears. I'm going to stop the session now. We're going to be shifting gears, and at the top of the hour, we're going to be bringing the Vice President of Engineering at Presidio, Mladen Milanovic, and he's going to be talking about their RPA program on a global scale and why RPA programs fail and how you can prevent it, again, from a leader and practitioner perspective. So do not miss that session at the top of the hour. I'm going to be taking a break now. If you have additional questions, you need to find out what's going on, what the speakers and other participants are saying, go on to my name under Jose Perez in LinkedIn, and you're going to see there is a posting that I have put it there on this conference, RPA and Intelligent Automation. You can post additional comments or questions there. Connect with the speakers directly because they're all hyperlinked in that post, and we can keep the conversation going that way as well. So for now, enjoy your break. I'll see you back with Mladen Milanovic at the top of the hour.